Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Welcome to the Supply Chain Risk Management Consortium's sixth in a series of webinars, our capstone webinar on the prescriptive online supply chain risk and resiliency, a 90-day action plan tool. Today, we'll be focused on promoting supply chain risk and resiliency in your organization. Again, the assessment takes about 30 minutes to complete, and it builds out a tailored action plan for your business. Again, we appreciate your time today and participating in today's webinar on evolving resilient enterprise. We hope that your family are healthy and safe. Again, this is an interactive webinar. Please do log in to polev.com. It's in the chat, and /Greg Schlegel 910. My name is Jim DeVries, founder and president of Enhance International Group. I'll be the host of today's webinar. We also have Connor Fitcham from Uphaven Group from South Africa, who will be helping us facilitate. The Supply Chain Consortium has been delivering education webinars, workshops, and consulting focusing on supply chain risk and resiliency for over 12 years now. And joining with me today is Greg Schlegel. He'll be sharing his vast expertise. And Greg is one of the original evangelists of supply chain risk and resiliency and a former president of Apex, now ASCM. Greg, a few words.
You bet. Thanks, Jim. Pleasure to be here with you today to talk about our passion. If you've been on a couple of our webinar series associated with this tool and topic, you know that it's kind of our passion. I've taught this body of knowledge at Lehigh University for the last 10 years. Still teach ERM. We're not going to talk about enterprise risk management today, but we teach it at Villanova in their MBA class. I'm an old IBMer, spent 35 years as a supply chain exec, perhaps like many of you, across multiple Fortune 100s. I've taught supply chain management at 6 different US universities during my career. And as Jim said, I'm kind of a lifelong member of Apex, now ASCM. So great to be here with you and look forward to a great session.
Thanks, Greg. A little bit of my background. For the past 30 years, I've been a master black belt, supply chain and transformation executive, and currently a master integrator with Enhance International Group. I've served as a resilient leader for many startups, Fortune 500 companies, and I've worked to develop global teams to identify, prioritize, and deliver high return on investment, sustainable improvements, generating self-funding results. I've held leadership positions in sales, supply chain, finance, reporting, new product development, field ops, and operations. Starting my career in the 1980s with under Jack Welch at General Electric. Our teams have developed resilient enterprise ecosystems to accelerate digitization, innovation, supply chain risk management, leadership development, strategy, value creation. With that, I think we'll get started here, get into it. Greg, a few words about the consortium.
You bet. We said we'd give you a quick thumbnail sketch. As Jim mentioned, we've been in this space for over 12 years. This is on the right. It's a quick profile of who we are and what we do. We now have, I think it's 32 or 33 companies. They're not all on that sheet because we're growing quite fast with new members. That's about 1,700 supply chain risk professionals around the globe. These companies on the right-hand side, you can see we break it up into education, consulting, and software as a service. These companies bring tools, techniques, methodologies, and software solutions to do the heavy lifting to help us identify, assess, mitigate, and manage risks. That's what we do. On the left-hand side, we kind of think of it as 5 areas. One area is online education. We have 2 certificate courses. One is a basic supply chain risk and resiliency. The other is geared towards service and public health care. You achieve a certificate from the consortium and a few other platform organizations. It's self-paced, and it also includes assignments using some of our tools. We do coaching and consulting. We bring platform solutions to do the heavy lifting for supply chain risk. And then we have 2 online assessment tools. One is the online readiness assessment tool that basically evaluates your supply chain process maturity. And the other tool we're going to be talking about today is the 90-day action plan, which essentially evaluates and positions your company in terms of our risk maturity model, your risk appetite, and your risk culture using AI and ML algorithms. So that gives you a sense of who we are and what we do. Jim?
Thanks, Greg. A little bit about Enhance International Group. We're an exchange of experts to guide your transformation to provide that self-generating and self-funding results. We have over 50 consultants, consulting companies, and SaaS providers you can find on consultingeig.com. The Enhance International Group was founded principles on the concepts of people, process, data, and technology. EIG serves as the master integrator to provide you access to the best and brightest companies, like what we see with the consortium. And we act as a Swiss Army knife to give you the best of the best. Our team is dedicated to empowering your organization's workforce by leveraging EIG's partners' tenured thought leadership. And our goal is to provide you, our goals are to exceed your expectations with customized, predictable, sustainable, repeatable 90-day action plans. So as you can see, the bicycle slide is our mantra of linking strategy to execution. We have all of our partners aligned to either supporting strategy and or execution on our website. You can see that. And the 2 gear are inexplicably linked and in sync. Otherwise, you will become derailed as your company. Developing an agile supply chain risk and resiliency mindset is one of the key drivers to make sure that your bike is always staying on the right path. In summary, 3 considerations from a supply chain risk and resiliency perspective include: are you making linked decisions between your strategic, tactical, and operational horizons? If not, your company will become unbalanced and derailed. Linking strategy through execution will build cadence. The better your cadence, the better your profitability and scalability. And then a solid strategy should result in many execution cycles resulting so that the momentum and cadence can be built. With that, we'll get started. Again, this is the capstone webinar. You can find all our webinars on the Supply Chain Risk Management Consortium's website, starting with an overview of this tool, the Supply Chain Risk and Resiliency tool. In webinar 2, we focused on the maturity model, then risk appetite, and then we got into operational propensity in December, and then the action plan last webinar in January. And today we'll talk about how to make supply chain risk and resiliency a priority in your company. The supply chain risk and resiliency action plan that we put together here, Greg and I, it's a prescriptive 90-day plan that's automated where you enter in the survey. And so what we ask you to do is to give, it'll be about 5 to 7 hours of your key leaders' times, 30 minutes to complete the survey, and the rest of the time is just learning on the action plan and reviewing that and integrating it into your priorities of your company. So the beginning is we'll provide virtual onboarding and collaboration and coaching sessions. We'll look at, as we just mentioned, the maturity model. Where are you? The risk appetite, who are you? Operational propensity, how do you operate? And then the 90-day action plan. And then the way it's laid out is you have a designated lead with an onboarding call. You bring in your 5 to 8 key stakeholders, your leaders in your organizations. So that's about 25 minutes of their time to complete the survey. Then the action plan report comes out, and then there's time to review that, the output of that report with your leaders. And then we confirm the 90-day action plan output from the report, and we'll review some of those to give you an idea of what they may look like. And then, well, getting those actions up and running, and then a pulse check after 60 days, and then what's next after that. So that's why we call it 90 days. Of course, these durations can all change to meet your needs. With that, we're going to get started. We're going to get back to the polling question, and I appreciate everyone filling out the poll. Looks like CPG is now leading the pack. So we started off with retail, and we got a tight tie for second here with high tech, retail, electronics, industrial. So we really appreciate everyone entering in their thoughts of their top 2 or 3 areas that they would like to see us focus on in the future. Greg, your thoughts?
Yeah, we always call this the horse race. It's great. We appreciate you getting engaged with us on Poll EV, because every webinar, it's almost a risk event. You never know exactly if Poll EV is going to cooperate with especially a global audience. So always good to see the horse race chart, and we appreciate everyone getting engaged with us. So thanks.
Yeah, and if you have additional thoughts, please add them in the chat, or at any time, please feel free to enter this into the poll until our second poll question arises. The poll is still open. So thank you so much. With that, we'll get on to the agenda. Greg?
You bet. Our agenda kind of looks like this, folks. We want to start with providing you some compelling reasons from our point of view to promote supply chain risk and resilience to be a priority for your company. We'll start there. Then we'll talk a little bit about assessing the risks or key risk indicators and provide you some insight, again, from our perspective. Next, we'll get into user feedback, like we said, from the actual program. And we have some testimonials from different industries as well. Then we'll move into what's in it for you and your company. Try to give you a sense of value add for you and the company. And then last but not least, how you can promote the journey, some helpful hints about what we've seen become very successful with other companies. So that's what our agenda looks like. We'll start with the compelling reasons to promote supply chain risk and resiliency. You can take a look at it. Kind of ominous, but it's out there, folks. And so we thought we'd start with this placard and then move on to some tactical insights and compelling reasons. So with that, our first is to discuss our VUCA landscape. What does VUCA stand for? Well, the V stands for volatility. So this is just a real quick terms and definitions. Volatility describes something that is liable to vary or change, sometimes very quickly and often for the worse. What is that? In our arena in supply chain, it's been the government lockdowns. Now it's phasing out, but for the last 2.5 years, that's been the volatility in our supply chain. The U stands for uncertainty. This is the state of not knowing or being able to rely on something. What does that mean in our landscape? Those are the supply and demand shocks that we all have witnessed and experienced because of the lockdown. Third, C, the C stands for complexity. This can be defined as something with many parts in an intricate arrangement. What is that in our landscape? That, folks, is our global supply chains. Pretty complex around the globe. And then finally, A is for ambiguity. Something is ambiguous. If it's open to more than one interpretation, what is that? Add up all the V's, the U's, and the C's, and that's what our landscape looks like at the moment. All of the above, folks. So we just wanted to share that with you in terms of all sectors are experiencing the wonderful world of the VUCA landscape. We have a few more. Next, we want to talk a little bit about a tumultuous 2023 beginning. This is a graph of US real GDP growth and forecast. This comes from our friends of the consortium at the US Conference Board. On the left, on the bottom, on the left of the red arrow is the history of the GDP in the US by quarter. And then you can see some of the elements that are contributing to the GDP. On the right-hand side of the red arrow is basically going forward. And as you can see, that projection is not a pretty picture. So it's going to be kind of a rough and tumble 2023 initially. So we wanted to share that with you. There's a few more compelling reasons. On the left-hand side, this comes from Gartner. Gartner did a global survey back in 2021, a couple hundred different companies across all sectors, and asked a few questions and got the response. The legend is blue is the respondents agreed with the statement on the left. The yellow is neutral, and the gray was no, we disagree. All we want to do is focus on the top two for now. Here's what they put together and how they answered it. Within 2 years, we will invest to make our supply chains more agile. That's great. Almost 90% said yes. The other thread was within 2 years, we will invest to make our supply chains more resilient. Music to our ears. Again, almost 90% of the respondents. Now let's go to the right-hand side and talk about what's going on now in 2023. So let's take a look at different survey and study findings, but one big one on the top right. In which geographic area has your company increased operations? Take a look. Very intriguing. The bulk of the answers in this study was the United States. And really, when you look at it, it's North America. So we also captured a few additional threads in terms of what's going on now. McKinsey calls it the rewiring of the global supply chain ecosystem. That's in their 2023 report. They also said in that report that, don't get too excited. Global ties still bind supply chains. They brought out a statistic that almost every major region still imports about 25% or more of at least one key resource that they need to produce products and services. Also, we found out from ARC Advisory, China has demonstrated it may not be a reliable partner going forward. And then on the bottom, CNBC put out a report back in November of 22 that was basically stating the U.S. shippers are seeing 20% drop in ocean freight. Ocean carriers are canceling as much as 50% of the sailings. They call them more ghost sailings, where they're sailing from point to point without cargo. And the Asia to West Coast prices are down about 80% from last year. So when you look at this now, it's a different world, folks, than it was 2 years ago. And with that, I'll turn it over to Jim for a few more.
Yeah, so Greg, just a couple comments. Yesterday I saw in the news that our shipping actually went up from last year from China. It's at an all-time high last year. Also, we have a question from our audience asking in the top right graph, are these mostly US companies answering the survey? Do you know that?
Yeah, it's a good question. I believe it's pretty much US centric. I have to admit, there were a few others in other regions, but my first blush reaction from what I remember is that it was US centric.
Great. Thanks, Greg. With that, I will cover the next slide here on Accenture's supply chain risk and resiliency worldwide study that they performed. And, it says here, exemplar companies that near 100% return on investment with their SCR&R investment demonstrated these practices. So again, these are companies that received 100% return on investment when they invested in supply chain risk and resiliency. So the first thing, of course, is what we espouse is making risk management a priority in the company. The second is centralizing the responsibility for risk management, much like any other centralized program. And third, investing aggressively with specific focus end-to-end supply chain risk and resiliency, visibility, and analytics, including scenario planning. So we see this all the time. We've been seeing a huge increase in this area with our partners, the Supply Chain Risk Management Consortium partners, of companies getting, as Greg likes to say, jiggy with risk alerts and driving supply chain risk and resiliency practices. So all good, very positive. Some of the top performing companies from a GRC and enterprise risk management perspective include, and this is from Aberdeen, a 34% reduction in risk value in the past 2 years, a 23% reduction in compliance related to the cost in the past 2 years. And then they also identified 4% were more likely than their competitors to systematically evaluate business processes for compliance. So getting in some of that enterprise risk management, and then 29% are more likely than their competitors to conduct quantified risk assessments. So the question is, how do we move from, I think there's a problem here, to creating value or understanding the value of dealing with these risks proactively? Greg, any other comments?
I thought it was those are some pretty compelling ROIs, folks, but it does require, as the Accenture study mentioned, it requires a commitment, the will and a commitment to move forward with good supply chain risk and resiliency best practices. All right. Yep. We said we'd move to the next section. That's assessing the risks, give you some key risk indicator insights. Let's take a look. All right. This is, again, a little more getting you grounded, terms and definitions. This comes from our best-selling book. It's still doing pretty well. It's been out there for like 7 years. All good. Kind of a first of a kind way back when. Supply chain risk definitions, we basically have 3. We want to give them to you. Strategic risks. These are risks that are most consequential to an organization's ability to carry out its business strategy. These can be existential, folks. Mostly these are risks that we do not control. They're geopolitical, weather related. You can plan for them and you can build mitigation strategies for them, but we basically don't control. Normally, we don't control these risks, and they're normally pretty impactful. Next, second, tactical risks. These risks relate mainly to external issues with your supply base and your customers. And we always start in the supply base because it's what we're comfortable with in this space. But you have to start thinking about your customers' risks. The customer and demand side risks can be as frequent and as impactful as losing a supplier, just so you know. Last one is operational risks. these are somewhat disproportionate. They are very high frequency. They happen all the time. All right. They happen every shift in your supply chain. And essentially, they're internal process risks that you say as a company you control within your supply chain. Yet these are the most frequent risk events that happen every day in almost every manufacturing and service sector. So we wanted to share that with you. And one thing to remember, not all risks are the same, folks. All right, we have some more. We thought we'd take a look at the end-to-end supply chain landscape today. What are we seeing through our clients, webinars, workshops, conferences, and so forth? Again, we have 32, 33 companies who provide information to us. One is there's an increase in inflation. We all know that. That probably will diminish demand across many sectors. What else do we see? Many sectors have been attempting to cancel their 2x, 3x, 4x orders during the pandemic, which will produce an imbalance in your supply and demand profile. Next, companies who ordered 2x, 3x, 4x to get it as fast as possible during the pandemic are now receiving that supply, and that basically is becoming what we would call excess inventory, folks. So still a bullwhip imbalance in terms of demand and supply. The next element and bullet, it's good for us as consumers, kind of bad for retailers and a few other sectors as well. So for us, the primary impact, and we're going to talk about retail today, we see another maybe 6,000 to 9,000 stores will be closing across the globe in 2023. We wish we had better news for the retail folks, but this imbalance and the bullwhip is still impacting many of those companies and their stores negatively. So with that, I'll turn it over to Jim.
So what's interesting is we put out this slide about 3 or 4 months ago, this past slide here, and then here we are looking at the U.S. Supply Chain Index from RSM out of New York City and Bloomberg. And they put together an index called the Z-score based on the mean and standard deviation from 2001 to 2019. So it's based on that baseline, and then it looks at all these different metrics. Overall index is made up of capacity utilization, delivery time, freight traffic, job vacancy rate, manufacturing prices paid, and inventory. And what do we see here? We see we're coming out of 2022. Obviously, we were short. A lot of times we were short on inventory. Now we're seeing a lot of excess inventory coming into this year. And what are we seeing? We're seeing factories starting to be empty. As Greg said on the previous slide, his third bullet here, it said companies are receiving, who order 2 to 3 times are now receiving that supply. So they receive the supply, but now the orders are being canceled. So now there's a lot of canceled orders and factories are slowing down. We see that in the CPG industry and many other industries, and it's affecting everyone. So now we're trying to readjust ourselves to a new norm. We're on the positive side of things. Interest rates are starting to be reduced. The Fed and the market is responding, and what I hear is a rough and rumbling return to normal throughout 2023. In 2024, hopefully we'll be back to our old selves, is what the word is out on the street and according to RSM and Bloomberg. So just thought I'd share that with you of what we're seeing in the marketplace. See a question in the chat. Thank you for your comments. Okay, I'll just move on. So we're going to get into something kind of technical. We'll see how it goes here. So we look at this as KRI impact value and time to impact. So we've been talking about all these different risks. How do you manage them at the operational, tactical, and strategic levels? And it's And we look at it as the impact of the value of that KRI, what it provides you in the time to impact. The quicker you respond with these operational metrics, the bigger impact you will have. So you'll get more green. The longer you wait, the bigger the impact. So if you react on your operational KRIs, key risk indicators, of the dollars, the number of risk responses, time to impact, time to recovery, and risk priority number, those are those typical operational KRIs. If you have those embedded, then you're going to be able to protect yourself much better. If you wait and try to look at it from a tactical perspective, from a risk avoidance perspective, Altman Z score, which we covered in previous webinars, value at risk mitigation percent over time, and customer margin to serve, those are the result of not doing what we wanted to do from an operational level. You'll start seeing those show up. And then from a strategic perspective, at the boardroom, you're going to see the strategic KRIs showing up, which is revenue growth due to supply chain risk and resiliency. It could be a revenue growth, or in this case, as we saw here, we're seeing in the marketplace, there's a decline in revenue due to customers canceling orders. And you also have customer retention issues, customers leaving, customers going out of business, profitability. It could be a degradation in profitability. And if you do it right, you're actually increasing profitability during these downturns. And then, of course, the cost of the risk program and cash conversion cycle and working capital. So these are some introduction of some KRIs, key risk indicators, that can help you make better decisions in how you manage each of these time horizons at the operational level on your shop floor, the tactical at the general manager level, and strategic at the executive C-suite. So another way to look at this, the opportunity KRI impact. So if we flip it, we say, well, where's the real opportunity? Well, the real opportunity is, again, to get those operational KRIs in line, as Greg mentioned earlier, and then drive those through tactical cascading metrics into your strategic metrics. So when they are all linked and interlinked into cascading metrics, you can get the full value out of addressing those key risk indicators and through the actions that you drive. Greg, your thoughts?
We gave you the definitions. Here are some KRIs, like we said, but it's all part of the journey. And if it's not apparent, the journey is accretive. All right. One element builds on another. That's really what we've done with the 5-stage maturity model. It depicts a journey, folks. It is a journey. It's not just buying a piece of software, putting it in and saying you now have supply chain. This is a journey. We wanted to convey that to you and also provide you some KRIs associated with the different elements of the journey.
So with that, we're going to ask you, with all the KRIs that were introduced there, which KRIs are you familiar with or appeal to you in your company? So it looks like somebody entered in a few of these. Margin growth, they want to use supply chain risk and resiliency to drive margin growth. The risk response time was something that appealed to them. Time to recovery. How much time does it take us to recover from a risk event once it occurs? And then return on assets. Are we getting the return on assets that we expected throughout a risk event? Mm-hmm. Greg, your thoughts?
Yep. No, great. Again, thanks for engaging with us. And one thing, and it's great to see some of the, especially time to recovery and response time. In risk, time is money, folks. All right. We could go on and on. If you go into our courseware, our book, we talk about time is money, especially when you identify, assess, and then attempt to mitigate a risk. So time is money. Thanks a lot for exercising at least some of the bullets that we see. Appreciate that.
Thanks so much.
And yeah, and the font gets bigger as the frequency increases. That's great.
Yeah, keep entering them in. So love to see. Yeah, risk response time obviously is the number one.
Yep.
Love it. Fantastic.
Very good. Thanks.
With that, we're going to get on to the case studies, and we have covered 6 different case studies over our time here of the 6 webinars, and we'll be more than happy to address any industry case study that of interest to you. And again, this is the 90-day action plan. What we're going to focus here is how do you develop that 90-day action plan that's made up of, again, the maturity level assessment of where are you today on maturity and where would you like to be? Who are you? What's your risk appetite? Are you a pragmatist, conservator, manager, maximizer? Again, there's no right or wrong in this. And then how do you operate? Again, no right or wrong. Are you more bureaucratic? Are you more agile, startup, or trapped? It's just the culture of your organization. And that all envelops into the 90-day action plan. So as we look at those 3 different horizons here, you have where are you, which it can be, again, foundation, visibility, resiliency, and sustainability and predictability, any of those maturity levels. Then you get into the who are you? Are you a pragmatist, conservator, manager, or maximizer? And then how do you operate? Are you bureaucratic, trapped, startup, agile, and so forth? So the question is, what combination are you? And this is how we do our assessment of an action plan. Obviously, what we listed here is just an inkling of what we see. There are different situations for different companies or organizations. And there's a total of 88 possible personas, not to mention that you could be borderline between pragmatic, conservator, so you can double or triple this. There's many different permutations of this. That's why we kind of need a AI algorithm to help us out with the action plans. So with that, some of the case studies and testimonials that we've received from a retail perspective. We received, oops, sorry about that. From a retail perspective that we will be covering today, that particular client said we validated their organization commitment to supply chain and risk management excellence, reinforced their efforts to be a resilient enterprise in a very competitive sector. In that retail sector, we'll pick up another one because we heard about CPG was number 1. We agree with the persona. It's amazing on how well it aligns to their journey. And they had an extra O at the end there. They must have been very enthusiastic. And then electronics was another one. We agree with the persona. This will help us create a centralized repository for supply chain risk management, a single point of truth. Love that quote. And then chemicals, we agree with persona and action plan, which we will support and develop in our 2022 planning. Greg, any other words on this slide?
No, it's just we've gone across multiple sectors. We just wanted to give you a sense of what some of the executives said after going through the tool and the survey questions and then seeing the results. So we've had very good results. Actually, I'm not touting it too much, but we haven't really had a big pushback. So we're very pleased that the algorithms and the survey questions have aligned quite nicely with the industry sectors and execs that have gone through the survey tool. So we're very pleased with the outcome as of today.
And we did receive a question from the audience asking, Greg, did we receive any, or did any of our customers, were they surprised by any of the results?
Yes, that's why we have the retail folks. We did have some, I won't call it pushback, but it was a little bit of a surprise. Again, think of it, when you get 5 to 8 to 10 executives in a division or a plant or an operation, and they're all in different disciplines, you get different perspectives associated with questions revolving around risk. So yes, this is why we put out the retail question or the feedback today, so that you could see actually what the execs said about what they saw and read from our 90-day report. So stay tuned, we're getting there. All right. Speaking of, this is feedback from a retail organization. This is their persona assessment results. Here's what it looks like. We'll just go left to right. On the left, you see the SCR&R maturity model. That's our 5-stage. We've talked about that at length. What the survey does and the algorithms is it positions the organizations as is positioned on the chart. And that is the red icon. You can see that their as is situation is up in stage 5. So they are well into sustainability. And if you haven't been with us on the previous webinars, each one of those stages, folks, I'm not trying to scare you, but each one of those stages is about 18 to 24 months of work. All right. And they are accretive. So this organization is pretty much up there at the exemplar risk resiliency level. In the middle, the risk appetite. That essentially they are positioned between being managers, which is the blue, and maximizers, which are what we call gamers, meaning you look at risk as an opportunity, not as we must stay away from that risk because it might end up as a loss. They are positioned right where they touch managers and maximizers. All right. And can you have 2 different risk perspectives? Yes, you can. And on the right-hand side, their operational propensity, or what we like to call, what's the shape of your culture kite? All right. They essentially are agile. You can see on the bottom, we look for the long pole in the tent. The longest pole in the graph is agile. They're very agile, very flexible. And they also are collaborative on the left-hand side, you can see. So they're kind of pushing and pulling here in terms of what they do pretty well. So they're collaborative, they're agile, they're flexible. We call that the double tail. All right. Can you have more than one tail? Sure, you can. All right. Essentially, this is an exemplar. And we wanted to share with you what their AI ML computer generated charts look like. We have more. We have feedback, user feedback. We go through, as Jim presented, that 90-day process. We go through that dialogue to help the client help themselves. Here's what they said about their maturity. All right. We've been improving our supply chain solution sets and risk management methodologies for 10 years. Kind of bodes well in terms of they've gone through major stages within our maturity. We're a global manufacturer. We've been upgrading our IT support for the last 5 years. We embarked on a 5G implementation. Why? To get closer to their customers. From a risk perspective point of view, what'd they say? We consider ourselves good risk managers. They utilize many risk protocols, tools, and techniques. We embrace risk. We utilize many methods to evaluate risk reward, cost benefit on almost every product line they have. So it's embedded in their business decisions, which is great. We have 17 fashion seasons, each lasting about 3 weeks. On the what's the shape of your kite, the culture, they agree we're pretty agile, especially when it involves supply chain strategy and execution. They're pretty darn good. We're very collaborative. They agree. They maintain a supply chain risk and resiliency war room, which monitors their supply chain 24/7, 365 days a year. They were a bit surprised that their operational excellence that they felt they do, especially in supply chain, didn't really return a higher level on the graph. All right. And I can understand that, because this is a survey around risk and not necessarily a survey around your supply chain process maturity. All right. We said we have another tool that does that, and we'll talk about that at the end. But that was their feedback. What comes out of the report as well is a retail persona action plan, which is our next slide. And what did the tool recommend for their 90-day action plan? As you can see, they're pretty sophisticated. They are what we would call an exemplar. So what did the model come out with? Well, it said,
So
you
Greg,
should. Yeah, I'm sorry.
just before you get into that, I'm sorry, there's a question on the previous slide. Are
Sure.
the testimonial or the comments there, are they based on self-attestations interview? Is that as compelling as testing or examinations approaches?
Wow, I'm trying to understand the question.
I'm
Pretty
also-
much it comes from the interview process after the report. So again, the folks see the report, and then as we've shown you in the process, we then let them take a look at the report, and then we have a get together, a session over the phone, over over Zoom, and or face to face. So if the question is, I think the answer is they came from dialogue with him.
Yeah, I
Did
think
I
they were
answer the
asking.
question?
Yeah, and I think the question was surrounding, did you perform test examinations to see how they were performing?
No, there is
on-
no, there's no critique in that regard. Remember, this is not about execution. This is about perspectives. We're trying to profile how the organization perceives and works with risk, but not from a metric point of view. Hopefully I answered the question.
I think you answered it.
Okay. All right. And so this is the action plan that came from the solution set. We said maintain your funding. All right. To improve, there's still level of improvement. So maintain the funding, make sure you keep the funding, leverage the years of your supply chain performance and risk management. Maybe think about, which they don't have, think about an enterprise-wide risk management platform so that you can scale even larger across all your elements. Maintain a supply chain risk and resiliency director or VP. And it actually could involve, we advocated a COE, Center of Excellence, where you get folks engaged. They're certified in risk, they're certified in supply chain. They know all about, ISO 31000, 27, 28002, the whole COSO. It's a center of excellence. Many of the exemplars have that. We advocated that for them. Continue formal risk education. You always have to educate. Continue and maintain an internal website. Many exemplars maintain a risk and resiliency website. They actually have folks go in every 6 months and take some and answer some questions, to keep everyone moving forward. And then we wanted to also advocate that make sure your program is integrated with strategic, tactical, and operational approaches with your organization. And like we said, with the KRIs, aligned with your business KPIs. So that's really what came out of the retail process.
Excellent.
Mm-hmm.
So with that, think we go
Yep.
to the next section.
Yep, we go to the next section. We said we'd share with you some what's in it for you from our perspective and your company. So we'll kind of give you some helpful hints, hopefully. Maybe as an SCR&R lead, if you are thinking about being a lead, you will be formulating the risk management program for your organization. That's a pretty terrific experience. Something else. As an SCR lead, you'll be leading, guiding, directing, and coaching with your team and your peers. You will be driving bottom line value. How? By identifying, assessing, mitigating, and managing risks, like we showed you with some of the exemplar results. More, risk management is all about culture, folks. Remember that you will learn how to evaluate any of your division's risk maturity levels, risk appetites, and culture and drive value, because here's a helpful hint. Don't assume that every division in your company, if you're rather large, don't assume that every division will have the same risk maturity, the same risk appetite, and the same culture. That doesn't happen very often, so just be aware of that. And finally, you'll be enhancing your personal stock while you drive the SCR&R journey. So that's pretty much increasing your skill set on the street within your organization, and you will become a value added employee. We have more. This is how supply chain risk and resiliency grows market share. This comes from our friends at Aberdeen. A couple of years ago, they did a global study. Quick story from Aberdeen. On the right, they canvassed more than 100 companies way back when who claimed they were exercising good enterprise risk management, good governance risk and compliance tools. And so that was the composition of the respondents. So first they asked the question regarding maturity. All right. And they answered the questions. Second, they placed the companies into categories, and you can see them. Green is best in class, yellow is industry average, and red they call laggards. Now, the companies did not know how they were categorized, but Aberdeen does this all the time. Third, they asked the hard questions on the bottom, but I'll give you the backstory before I describe the chart. The backstory was the exemplar companies essentially take, now this is true, they take their chief risk officers on sales calls. Why? Well, the sales folks talk to the client or prospect about product quality, delivery, price, all that supply chain customer type of data. The CRO talks about their risk program and how they are more resilient and less risky than their nearest competitor, and why that company should buy from them. All right. And then after that, the Aberdeen asked the question down the bottom: is your risk program, is the cost of your risk program less than that added revenue? When you start to articulate, you went out on a sales call and we got that new business, not only because our product is great, but because they told us that we have a very robust risk and you're less risky, or we want to go with you. That's what you can see in terms of the green, yellow, and red. Then they asked another question: is the cost of your risk program equal to the added revenue? You can see the profile. And then finally, is the risk cost higher than added revenue? You can see that even some of the exemplars still have a lot of work to do. So how do they get that? How do they achieve that market share? On the left, they told Aberdeen, well, we define a workflow from risk identification to mitigation, so we have a high repeatable quality process. Nobody deviates. Another one, we align our staff accountability to corporate GRC objectives. All good. And then finally, we establish We've established GRC platforms, which means they scaled up, they bought some solutions to scale the good risk management across their entire organization. Pretty compelling. With that, I'll turn it over to Jim.
Thanks, Greg. And what we'll do here is kind of wrap up this section in looking at additional benefits from a supply chain risk and resiliency program. First, we'll look at the primary one that comes up most often is cost reduction. And you'll see a reduction in insurance premium in the order of 10% and an increase in automated workflow by addressing those constraints in your supply chain. Next, from a cost avoidance perspective, we'll see an effective and risk detection and assessment. So we'll be seeing those risks sooner, as we talked about those operational risks, an increase of 17%. You'll see that in your bottom line and cost avoidance and your costs. So then the third area is working capital. You'll see a greater cash flow, 94% increase in cash flow, or 13% increase in cash flow, resulting from a 94% cash flow forecasting increase. And then your free cash flow is between 10 and 30%. So the bottom line is you'll be able to uncover your cost, you'll have greater visibility to it, you'll be able to manage your cash better throughout your cycles. That will again drive your cash conversion cycle. You can see an increase of 10 to 20%. And then the fifth area is the Altman Z score, where you can be using that to look at your key supplier visibility, where every time you bring on a new supplier, it's going to cost you $1 to $3 million per year. By addressing that proactively, you're going to limit that impact to your bottom line. So as we always say, think big, start small, and act fast in order to achieve these additional benefits. So from the supply chain risk and resiliency tool, our tool, we ask, could 5 to 8 executives from your company fill out the 90 questions? Could those executives be in those disciplines? Because you want that cross-functional in your business unit. And again, every business unit you have will probably be different. So look at those as different entities in performing this assessment. So you have your procurement, logistics, supply chain, operations, production, your end-to-end supply chain as it really is defined. And could the executives from the same division and product line, again, we want a single division or product line to be focusing on the survey. And again, we want everyone to be focused on developing a single language. We all know how languages change with companies. And so we need a single supply chain language throughout the company and a single supply chain risk and resiliency language. And that language needs to support the goals of the company in the way that the company defines them and in that language. So again, these are all the different folks that we would espouse to be taking the assessment, the 5 to 8 folks. So we see in companies anywhere between 6 and 12 to 14 folks taking the assessment. So what do you get out of the assessment? You get a sense of where you are with the maturity model, where you are today and where you want to be, a sense of who you are relative to your risk appetite. Then how do you operate from an operational propensity perspective? Is it aligned to a 90-day action plan? So we provide that 90-day action plan to survive and thrive during COVID-19 and beyond. And you learn how to identify, assess, mitigate, and manage supply chain risks, resulting in knowing sooner and acting faster than your nearest competitors. And then it provides you that strategic advantage, as Greg mentioned, having those supply chain risk and resiliency managers talk to your customers to give you that competitive advantage. Great explanation there. And then by going through this program, every company that provides 5 or more executives the consortium will offer a 1 free pass of the online course, a value of $1,400 from the consortium. With that, Greg, we'll close this out.
You bet. What we'll do is give you a couple of additional helpful hints, kind of finish strong here. How can you promote the journey? Essentially, think of it this way. Communicate, communicate, communicate. You can't over communicate in this arena. Education for all, that's kind of a formal, we would advocate. Think about some type of formal education. Awareness, that's kind of the informal approach where you talk to your peers, your team, and so forth. Maybe think about building a burning platform. We've given you some statistics, kind of build up a sense of urgency as a lead. All right. And then one of the tricks is align the risk approach, whatever you advocate, to support corporate and divisional goals. We have a couple more to help you help yourself. Thoughts on promoting the journey? Take a look. There's a couple of threads. Socialize a few risk impact slides. If you've been with us for a while through the series, take a slide or 2 or 3 and socialize it and talk about the benefits. All right. Maybe advocate an online course. All right. You could, from an education point of view, maybe, perhaps some of your folks like to read as opposed to go through online courseware. So, pick up a book, either ours or others. There are many of them out there now. Great. We advocate, maybe you think about mapping your supply chain, keep it real small, essentially from customers to suppliers and everything in between. We can facilitate that for free. All we ask is that you get us to your location, or we can actually potentially do it online. When you do the mapping, we advocate maybe you're going to identify some key suppliers. Within that mapping exercise, maybe go through the Altman Z-score. If you can't find the Altman Z-score out there in Wikipedia, just feel free to give us an email and we'll send you how to do it. Secure your sponsor. If you're just starting, if you're in foundational, secure an executive sponsor for funding and get yourself an SCR&R lead, and then maybe investigate as you move forward, investigate risk alert software solution, because that identifies risks that are external, outside of your control, and that is part of the key to success. So with that, we'll finish up with we're totally on demand. We talked about education. We have 2 courses. We talked about supply chain readiness. That's evaluating your supply chain processes. We have a webinar on the 23rd to give you a sense of what that tool does. We talked today about SCR&R Action Plan. We have software as a service platforms to do heavy lifting, and we can also help you lead, guide, direct, and coach in your journey. So with that, I'll finish up with Jim. Appreciate you staying with us.
Yeah, thanks everyone for joining us today and providing your questions. We appreciate those questions and participation in the surveys. Very good. And Greg, thanks for taking us on the supply chain risk and resiliency journey. And Connor, thanks for your support of the webinar. And most importantly, again, thank you for all your insightful comments and suggestions, and please keep them coming. Greg, some final words?
You bet. With rising inflations, folks, and a distinct possibility of a downturn economy as we profiled, we think it's more important than ever to understand your supply chain risk maturity, your risk appetite, and especially your operating propensity, which is culture, to get you through the next 12 months in terms of our VUCA environment. So thanks a lot for spending time with us.
Thanks, everyone. And again, just as a reminder, we're seeing as we said before, we're seeing this gap in demand. It will come back, but if you need to survive and thrive during this time, this is a time to implement supply chain risk and resiliency and get your eggs in a row, because when it does turn, you can gain your unfair market share on the rebound of the economy. Thank you for joining us and have a great day.